Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Fem Deku was the overpowered lazy hero? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
A boy with curly green hair, freckles, and green eyes was lying in a green cloth hammock with green triangles tied to either end of a set of monkey bars on a playground in the Japanese city of Musutafu. A Pomeranian blonde boy with red eyes and a young girl who appeared to be his twin with an all-might hair clip were flipping through hero training cards across from him. Izuku's twin sister put down the card in question and said, "I've got an Endeavor card right here." The blonde held up a Mirko card and declared, "I got you beat." He smiled and said, "This is my ideal woman right here." "Aw man," the girl moaned, and she became envious when the boy on the other side of her spoke about Mirko in such a way. The boy on the hammock sighed and said, "Katsuki, stop playing with Izumi's head." This was Katsuki Bakugo, his best friend, Izuku Midoriya, and his twin sister Izumi. They were all close friends from their early years who had essentially known one another since birth. Katsuki laughed and said, "Oh come on, Deku. I'm just messing around." "Meanie," pouted Izumi. The boy yawned and returned to sleep, saying, "Whatever." A new voice said, "What are you three doing?" Izumi and Katsuki turned around as a result, and they saw a young girl their age standing there staring at them. Izuku had missed her because he was sleeping. The girl had fair skin that resembled porcelain, medium-length red and white hair that was split down the middle, and heterochromia, with one gray eye on her right and a teal-blue eye on her left. She was dressed simply, in a blue shirt, white shorts, and red shoes. With a thumb pointing at the dozing Izuku, Katsumi answered, "Oh, the two of us are just playing with hero training cards while he's asleep." Izumi said, "You want to join us?" After a few seconds, the girl nodded, saying, "Sure." The greenette sat down beside them and asked, "What's your name?" To which the two-toned girl replied, "Shoko. Shoko Todoroki." The boy with Pomeranian hair nodded and said, "Name's Katsuki Bakugo." Izumi picked it up and pointed to Izuku, saying, "I'm Izumi Midoriya, and the sleeper over there is my brother, Izuku. Aka the grisly sin of sloth, the laziest bump on a log you'll ever meet." Katsuki modified. With one blink, Shoto questioned, "Is he really that lazy?" Izuku's snoring broke the brief silence, and the boy turned over in his sleep, pulling the hood over his head to block out the sun. Izumi gave a flat response, "Yes." "Oh." Shoko nodded while observing the boy swaying in his hammock. Without a doubt, he was a lazy boy. Time skip. A few years later, Izuku, who was now 6 years old, was dozing off beneath a sakura tree, his head resting on a pillow that resembled his hammock. This was because his quirk, Disaster, allowed him to alter its form. He literally had the power to create either good or bad outcomes. He had the ability to transform anything into a different form, manipulate plants, turn minor scratches into large wounds, turn minor poisons into lethal toxins, and more. The only disadvantage was that it would deplete his energy. In terms of capacity, said stamina was already sufficiently low. The sound of tearful sobs coming from the right side of the tree he was under disturbed the grisly sin's hibernation as he continued to sleep soundly. "What the?" he moaned drowsily, then opened his eyes to see Shoko approaching. The girl appeared to have some kind of injury covered by a patch over her left eye, and she was crying. Izuku woke up more because he was worried, and he approached her. His voice was worried as he asked, "Shoko, what happened?" The girl sat down beneath the tree, still crying, and at first said nothing, but she let Izuku peek under her eye covering. It was an extremely unpleasant ice burn, as if someone had attempted to cover her face with ice after she had come into contact with something hot. Izuku's expression changed to one of shock, quickly erasing any hint of fatigue. The boy let his scarred friend cry while holding her close, not even understanding why. She needed as much consolation as possible. He asked, "What happened?" The girl, obviously upset, whimpered, My mother. She did this to me." The boy was perplexed by this because, from what he had heard about Miss Todoroki, she did not appear to be the type of person who would simply inflict such trauma on her own daughter. The numbers didn't add up, but detective work was not for this moment. When he heard someone calling Shoko's name in the distance, the boy kept letting her relax on his shoulder. "Shoko. Where are you?" called a man. Izuku questioned, "Is that someone you know?" As a man with red hair and a thin red beard strolled through the park wearing rather casual clothing. The two-toned girl told him, "My dad." The slothful boy nodded and said, "Oh, I get it." He went on to say, "You should probably go to him." "I don't want to, though," Shoko whimpered, unwilling to part from her friend. This caused the Grizzly Sin's mind to shift gears. The girl appeared to come from a dysfunctional household, as evidenced by her stern-looking father and her mother's abrupt outburst. That wasn't good. What, though, could he do to assist? His 6-year-old brain was at a loss for what to do. At this moment, Shoko's father was able to see them at last and began to approach them. Izuku didn't really give it much thought before he snapped his fingers and caused his pillow to change into a spear with a blue shaft, a gold head, and a double-edged blade. Spirit Spear Chastiful was this person. Izuku moved Shoko behind him, prepared to strike if necessary, while the spear bobbed and weaved to follow the man's every move. Shoko gasped in shock, what are you doing?" When the girl's father arrived, the Sin of Sloth kept her behind him and said, "Stay behind me." The man insisted, "Shoko, why are you with this boy?" Izuku shot back, "Maybe because I'm one of the few friends she has right now?" The man turned to face Izuku and growled, "What did you just say to me, boy?" Izuku sensed the redhead's immediate animosity and made Chastiful move between them, forcing him to stand back up. He snapped his fingers, causing the spear to split into numerous smaller spears that encircled the man from almost every direction. Spirit Spear Chastiful. Form 4. Increase. "Are we going to have a problem here, sir?" he inquired. The patriarch of the Todoroki family silently scowled at the smaller spears. He was somewhat impressed, though, that this boy had the guts to confront him despite everything. After a moment, B said, "No, we won't." The Sin of Sloth nodded and withdrew his spears, saying, "Good." The man said, "What's your name, kid?" The boy answered, "Izuku Midoriya." He added, pulling up his pants to the left to reveal a bear tattoo on his ankle, "I'm also known as the Grizzly Sin of Sloth." "What did you do to get such a title?" Enji raised an eyebrow in question. Shoko instinctively said, "He's the laziest person I know." At this, Izuku merely yawned. "I'm not lazy, I just get bored easily, and tired," he murmured. Flatly, the two-toned girl asked, "What's the difference?" Enji, on the other hand, could see that they had a good relationship. Then he considered the boy's peculiarity, which made him think of a power he had read about as a child. Is it feasible? With a twinge of curiosity, he wondered. "You've known this boy for a while, haven't you, Shoko?" he inquired. Reluctantly, the girl said, 2 years. Enji hummed, That does give me a few ideas." As he turned to leave the two alone, he added, "Just be home before dark." Izuku sighed as he flipped Chastiful back into a pillow and settled down on it, saying, "Well, that went better than I thought." As she lay down beside him, Shoko remarked, "You have a strange idea of better." The lazy boy shrugged and said, "Well, as long as no fists were thrown, everything is fine." The girl put her head on his lap and nodded, rolling her eyes, "Sure." Time skip. 9 years later, Izumi and Izuku were getting ready and walking to school together. Izumi in particular had grown quite a bit. She became one of the most attractive girls in their school after going through puberty. Her figure was the envy of the other girls in their year. Her hair now reached her shoulder blades, and her skin was so nicely tanned that it resembled the skin tone of the rabbit hero Mirko. In addition to her long lashes and green painted nails, her figure was sexy as hell, with G-cup breasts, a supermodel waist and lower figure, a peach-shaped bubble ass, thick thighs, long legs, wide hips, love handles, and a toned stomach that would make a porn star jealous. For obvious reasons, her figure had also drawn the attention of numerous young model scouters. Izuku, on the other hand, didn't appear to undergo any physical changes. His height was the only significant change. Aside from that, he didn't appear all that different from his childhood. He remained the slothful sloth that his title suggested. Both of them were currently on their way to the train station while dressed in their school uniforms. They managed to make it to class on time, but soon had to take a lengthy detour after a villain attack disrupted their commute. Izumi sashayed over to Katsuki Bakugo's desk, sat on top of it, and draped her right leg on his shoulder. Her lashes batted at him, her plump lips curling into a smile as Izuku sat at his desk and went to sleep on his pillow. She purred, "Miss me, darling?" The teenager with red eyes laughed and said, "No, but it's still great to see you." Izuku was the third wheel because Katsuki and Izumi had begun dating in their sophomore year of high school. Sliding off the desk and into his lap, the girl hugged his neck while pouting. She shot back, "Liar." With her breasts pressing against the boy's chest, the girl continued, I can read your mind, Katsuki. I can hear the dirty things you're thinking about me. Izuku laughed and said, you never could hide your thoughts that well, Kachan. The blonde turned to his girlfriend and grabbed her chin, snapping, shut up, Deku. He growled and gave her a hard kiss, saying, come here, you. Even if Izumi wanted to, she could resist melting into it. In fact, she enjoyed Katsuki's aggressive behavior. The Pomeranian growled in the girl's ear, his body roaring at him to take the girl in his lap to a remote location and rape her. Now you've done it, you got me horny. Unknowingly stifling Katsuki's lust, their teacher said to the class, okay, settle down, class. Izuku's ears and eyebrows twitched as Katsuki whispered to his girlfriend, meet me alone after school. We're not done here. The Grizzly Sin thought, this guy, later. When the day was over, everyone was getting ready to leave for their homes. At that moment, his mother, Inko Midoriya, texted him. The text said, come home as soon as possible, someone is coming over today. Izuku texted back, who is it? Inko answered, come home and find out. As he packed his belongings to go home, the boy thought to himself, weird. As he watched Katsuki drag Izumi from the classroom to another location. He complained, sometimes I wonder how I'm not an uncle yet, before heading out. In any case, he knew Izumi wouldn't be around for long. Somewhere else. As Katsuki slammed Izumi against the wall of an alleyway far enough from the school to avoid trouble, Izumi groaned. Sighing and growling like an animal that had finally cornered its desired partner, the blonde then aggressively kissed and bit the brunette's neck. KK Katsuki, don't make me wait, Izumi gasped as she became aroused. Katsuki growled as he dropped their clothes and went to town, making Izumi groan even louder as she was literally fucked into next week. Then prepared to not be able to walk straight for a week. Somewhere else. He was walking home with Izuku, cursing the quirk laws that prevented him from floating the entire way, to find out who was coming and why his mother wanted him home as soon as possible. This sucks, the grizzly groaned as he made a turn to go home, and didn't see the person making the same turn, and bumped right into them. Ah, ack. The two of them yelped as they collapsed to the ground. URG, that hurt, Izuku groaned, rubbing his head as he slowly opened his eyes, and felt them go wide as he saw someone who he hadn't seen in years. It was a girl with short peppermint-colored hair in a girl's uniform for a different school, and he knew only one girl with an ice burn on the left side of her face. Shoko? He gasped, causing her to look at him. Huh, the girl groaned as she looked at him, and immediately started blushing as she realized who she was looking at. Izuku? She gasped. The girl had changed a lot since they last saw each other. Her eyes were now much sharper and more seductive looking, her lips looked much more plump, and it looked like she'd started wearing mascara. But most notably, her figure had matured, quite a bit. Her figure was actually in the same league as Izumi's, though her bust was a bit smaller at an F cup. How? When did you get here? The Grizzly Sin remarked, I haven't seen you in years. It was, at my father's request. As they stood up, Shoko gave him a slip of paper and said, he wanted me to head to this address. Oh, Shoko? Izuku looked at the paper and blinked before telling her, this is the address of my apartment. Really? Why would we be going to your place? The girl asked, frowning and staring at the paper in bewilderment. That's strange, she thought. I have a feeling both of us are gonna get some major headaches over this, Izuku sighed. Come on, I'll show you the way, he called out. Somewhere else. As Katsuki straightened up, Izumi gasped and groaned as she lay face first on the ground with her hips raised, her body clearly showing signs of being ravaged. Katsuki, don't leave me, please. With a, fuck stupid, expression that revealed hearts had formed in her eyes, the girl groaned as she turned to face the boy. I won't, so don't worry. He laughed as he told her, Izuku would kill me if I did. He then helped her get dressed again and picked her up bridal style, choosing to carry her the majority of the way until she was able to stand again. Later, Izumi and Katsuki parted ways after Izumi was able to feel and use her legs again, and now the greenette was heading home, passing under an overpass en route. This would turn out to be a mistake, though, as a manhole cover behind her shot into the air as a sludge monster erupted from the sewer. It began to cover her in slime as it pulled something straight out of a hentai to try and get inside her, as a meat suit, it said. Izumi summoned a small tornado around herself in an attempt to push the prick away from her in an attempt to fight back and survive. However, it was ineffective because it began to move down her throat and attempt to control her body, actually enjoying the shape of its future skin suit. Izumi thought, disgusted, damn it, how'd I get this fucker off me, as she felt the slime slide down her throat. Just as the slime villain had finally succeeded in forcing itself into Izumi and taking over her body, another figure emerged from the sewer. When a massive man emerged, a deep voice said, "There's no need to worry, now that I'm here, that is. Damn it. You're using me like a puppet, BB bastard." Izumi's body moved against her will, making it difficult for her to speak. Every might. Izumi's wind abilities were used to try and cut the man with sharp gusts of weaponized air as the monster roared and lunged at him. Knowing that there would inevitably be some injuries, All Might thought, okay, I need to figure out how to get him out of that girl without hurting her too much. As the girl flew over him, he reared his arm back and ducked under her, giving him a powerful blow to her stomach. Izumi fell to the ground in a heap, moaning as she held her stomach, still feeling the pain, and this had the effect of making her throw up the sludge man. Izumi stopped moaning, and the symbol of peace took a moment to check on her before gathering up the slime villain. Somewhere else. After returning to Izuku and Shoko, the two managed to get to the former's apartment without any problems and were catching up. "So your dad wanted you to concentrate on your studies, so you couldn't see us?" the boy inquired. "Yes." Shoko nodded in response, saying, "It's so annoying. He's hellbent on getting me into UA, so he's done a lot to get me ready." Izuku had a sneaking suspicion that Shoko and Enji were having an affair, but he decided it would be impolite to inquire, so he left it alone until she was prepared to give a thorough explanation. "Well, if he sent you here, what is he even planning?" Izuku pondered. The two-toned girl said, "That's what I'd like to know, myself." After entering the Midoriya apartment, the two noticed that Enji had just arrived. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for the unexpected visit, but I wanted to talk to you and your son about something," the man said to Inko. Inko nodded in response, wondering what was going on. "It's no trouble, sir, but I am curious as to what this is about." The fact that Shoko's father was the number 2 hero Endeavor was a huge surprise to both Izuku and Inko, as you might have guessed, especially since it appeared that he was searching for Izuku. Feeling a little suspicious, Izuku wondered, what is he up to? Enji was quick to get to the point by asking the Sin of Sloth a quick trivia question as the four of them sat down at the dinner table in the tiny apartment while Inko made tea for everyone. "Tell me, Midoriya, to what extent do you know about quirk marriages?" the flame hero asked. "Yes, exactly. I've completed my homework on them. I do hope the whole thing doesn't mean what I think it is, though," Izuku said, sighing. "People pair up in these marriages solely to create powerful offspring." As Inko took a seat, the man explained, "I'm asking because those marriages pertain to my reasons for calling this meeting." "And that is?" Shoko became tense as the woman trailed off. "Your son's quirk reminds me of the powers of the fairy kings of legend, and my Shoko has a quirk that makes her the most powerful elemental quirk user in recent history." Enji started out. "Simply put, I believe that their potential together could potentially shake the world to its foundations." He went on. "Ergo, I'd like to propose that we join our children together in a quirk marriage union." He continued, clasping his hands. "What?" With a furious expression on her face, Shoko yelled. Izuku moaned, "And there's the headache. What's making you sound so angry?" The flame hero pointed to his daughter and said, "I thought you'd be glad I chose someone you were fond of, because I remember how close you two were as children." Izuku touched Shoko's shoulder before she could finish her sentence. "Yes, but I didn't want it to happen like," Shoko began. He knew that shouting and fighting would not solve the problem, so he told her, "Shoko, calm down and let's take a moment to talk things out." Enji paused for a moment before continuing, saying, "Mrs. Midoriya, do you have any counter-arguments or additions?" did he ask? "Regarding Izuku's peculiarity and its connection to the Fairy Kings, you are correct. We have also observed the similarity." Inko gave a nod. Izuku also nodded, saying, "The only thing I'm missing are the wings." "They still haven't grown?" the two-toned girl blinked as she asked. The boy shrugged and said, "Apparently not. So, do you think my suggestion is worthwhile?" the second-ranked hero inquired. "Well, I don't really have an abusive bone in my body, so I can confirm that Shoko is in no danger from me," Izuku responded. "So yeah, it's worth considering," he continued. "But I think Izuku will agree with me that this decision should be just as much Shoko's as well as ours in this case," Inko said. Enji looked at his daughter and nodded, acknowledging, "That is a fair point. Shoko, what are your thoughts on this?" he asked. After a brief period of silence, Shoko glanced at Izuku and then back down before sighing tensely. "I'm okay with it," the two-toned girl answered, "as long as Midoriya is." Izuku shrugged just before he saw the playful gleam in Inko's eyes. And I am, since I don't mind that it's you. What have I done? He thought fearfully. As long as it's your childhood sweetheart, you don't mind, do you? She gave me a cheeky smile. With a face-palming sigh, the boy said, Mom, please, don't. Somewhere else. In the meantime, Izumi, what on earth happened to you? When the girl saw the true form of the #1 hero, which appeared thin and malnourished, she gasped in disbelief. Izumi ended up hitchhiking with the man through the air to ask a question after the sludge villain was defeated, which brings us to the current situation. The man sighed as he sat down and lifted his shirt, revealing a particularly nasty wound on his side. URG, it's a long story. Gurk. The girl put a hand to her mouth and gagged in disgust. The blonde sighed and went on, yeah, it's nasty. I got this in a fight with a real piece of work 5 years ago. It couldn't have been a toxic chainsaw. Izumi frowned and observed, he never landed a hit that bad. The man remarked, somewhat impressed by her expertise, you know your stuff. And you're right. It wasn't him. He added grimly, no, this came from somebody way worse. As a result, my stomach and lungs have been obliterated, and my time as the symbol of peace has been cut down to 3 hours a day. The wind girl hummed thoughtfully, maybe we can fix that. What are you saying? The man inquired. My brother's quirk allows him to heal wounds by making them less minor, or even full on healing them with a special move that he can use once a year that's practically magic. The young woman replied. Really? Has he used it yet this year? The man gasped. Did he ask? Izumi answered, no, so you've got a chance to bounce back from this. But that makes me wonder, why are you all the way out here? Does this injury have anything to do with it? She inquired. Yes, it does. I am seeking a successor, the man replied with a nod. A successor? Confused, the half-telepath parroted. All Might shrugged, it's hard to explain quickly. Boom. From where they were now, it was unclear what caused the dark cloud that burst from the Tatooine shopping center a few seconds later. What the hell? Before noticing something concerning, Izumi let out a yelp. Wait, All Might, your pockets. The sludge guy, where are you? With alarm, she inquired. The weaker symbol of peace looked down and saw that his pockets were open, indicating that the bottle he was carrying had fallen out and probably unleashed the villain all at once. Ah, what a waste, panicked, he cried out. Yes, we must go to the boat right away. Hurry up. As she opened the door to the roof they were on, Izumi yelled. Somewhere else. Enji and Shoko, back with Izuku, Inko, and the Todoroki pair, were about to depart when the man recalled something. Oh, I nearly forgot. You have a daughter too, don't you? The man inquired. Inko nodded and said, yes, but she's already spoken for. Izumi has a boyfriend. Who? Surprised, Shoko inquired. Izuku replied, it's Kachan. The two-toned girl said, somehow, that doesn't surprise me. Where is she, by the way? She added, perplexed, I thought she'd be home by now. The grizzly Sin sighed in frustration and said, I think it's best I don't say. Enji muttered in agreement, yes, I think it's best we leave that topic alone. Shoko, would you prefer to head home now or stay here a little longer and come home later? Glancing at his daughter, he inquired. I'll probably return home later. After giving it some thought, the girl said, I'd like to spend some more time with Izuku. The man nodded as he left the apartment, leaving Shoko by herself with the Midoriyas. I thought as much. Take care, Midoriya, ma'am. Once more, there was silence for a moment before Inko broke it. Izuku led Shoko to his room while she grinned and said, I'll go fix some more tea. Come on. I have some plants I'd like to show you, he called out. The girl followed, muttering, oh okay, somewhere else. Once she got to Tatooine Shopping Center, Izumi could only gasp in horror at what she saw, a situation she feared she might have unintentionally created. Her boyfriend was being held captive and used as a weapon by the sludge villain. No, Katsuki, she said in terror. Gosh, with all those explosions and fire, it appears that the other heroes are unable to approach that villain. All Might cursed, clutching his side as his wound throbbed, preventing him from doing anything. While this was going on, Katsuki appeared to be scared and struggling to escape, which caused Izumi to have a thought. With her wind quirk blowing so forcefully that it extinguished the fire, the girl began running towards the perilous situation without even thinking about it. Again, what the, you? The sludge man growled. You jerk, get rid of my boyfriend. He recoiled and his grip weakened as Izumi sent a powerful blast of wind at his eyes and barked. Oh my, Izumi. Why in hell are you doing this? The blonde let out a gasp. Even the reason I don't have time to explain is beyond my capacity, so please stop talking and assist me in removing you. As she attempted to free her boyfriend, the vedette lost her temper. With his teeth clenched in rage, All Might watched as the girl battled to save her friend despite the fact that she was physically weaker than most of them. He thought, look at me, I'm pathetic. This girl is fighting to save her friend, and I'm letting myself get held back by something as trivial as an injury. I have to do something. He made himself do something else. The symbol of peace forced himself to regain his muscular form and dashed into the fray, preventing the sludge monster from striking Izumi and clearing the two. I am truly pitiful, am I not? With a sigh, the man reared his first back and said, here you are, putting yourself in danger to get your boyfriend to safety, and I was failing to live up to my ideals. What the? Katsuki let out a gasp. Just as All Might was about to deliver a powerful blow, Izumi yanked them away and said, I'll explain later. Detroit Smash. With a single blow, the sludge villain was blown away and the man roared. The crowd began cheering because the force was actually powerful enough to create a small tornado and alter the weather. Izumi moaned, Mom and Izuku are going to kill me. Later, Izumi was headed home after the whole ordeal was over, and this afternoon had been a nightmare because she was fairly certain she should have been home an hour ago. As she headed home, the girl whimpered in dismay, I'm so gonna get chewed out for this. Ha ha ha. I'm here. The mocha-skinned girl almost leapt out of her skin in reaction to All Might's sudden appearance. All Might exclaimed. Oh my god. From where did you come? The telepathy wind user yelled as she attempted to stop her heart from pounding. Where else from the crime scene? The mountain of a man replied with a hearty laugh, right before he deflated. Nah. He continued, I came to talk to you about your display of courage and heroism back there. Izumi told him, aside from wind control, my quirk is that I have telepathy. The only thing going through my head was saving my boyfriend, and that made me move without thinking. I observed my boyfriend's thoughts back there, she clarified. With a nod in return, the number one hero said, and that acted as fuel for your fire. But I get the feeling that you aren't here just for a social call, the young lady commented. That's correct, I actually came to find you about something important. All Might gave a nod. What would that be? The tanned brunette pondered. You obviously want to become a hero. The man went on, your behavior today speaks for you, which is why I've chosen you to inherit my quirk. A peculiar inheritance? What? Izumi blinked as she asked. It was going to get interesting, somewhere else. Back in the meantime, Shoko and Izuku were in the boys' bedroom, and it goes without saying that it was interesting. The room was primarily filled with 3 items: a computer, a TV, a number of gaming consoles, plants, a tree-shaped bed frame that Chastifel's hammock mode could use and that had a teddy bear replica, and an unexpected amount of Undertale items. Specifically, a Gaster Blaster pillow in the aforementioned hammock. Whoa. The girl observed the plants surrounding Izuku's room and remarked, you have a lot of plants. She identified a few of them as having therapeutic qualities. Sitting at his desk with a hybrid bonsai tree, the boy shrugged and said, it helps me relax. The tree in question was a bonsai-style tree that resembled the world tree Yggdrasil or the fabled tree that was supposed to sit in the Fairy King's forest, but on a much smaller scale. It appeared to be a hybrid of a baobab tree, cherry blossom tree, old willow, and Greek olive tree. After hydrating the plant with a small watering can, he began trimming some of its overgrown leaves and limbs to make it more uniform. Surprised by the amount of effort Izuku put into caring for the hybrid plant, Shoko watched him do so. He rarely worked at anything, so this plant was very special to him. Did you create that plant using your quirk? Curious, she asked. Yeah. The Grizzly Sin replied. I took graftings from several types of trees that had the traits I wanted, then combined them into a bonsai seed and started growing it when I was 7. He continued. As she got a good look at the hybrid tree, the two-toned girl remarked, I'm not an expert, but it looks healthy. She wondered what it would look like if it grew to a large size. The boy laughed and said, given its appearance now, I think we can guess. After a period of silence, Shoko sighed deeply. She sighed and ran a hand through her hair, saying, it's so annoying. I'm sorry that my father put you in this situation. She apologized. He's always been like this, using his influence to get his way and pushing his desires onto others. I'm not thrilled about the way this turned out either, make no mistake, Izuku acknowledged. But I wasn't lying when I said I didn't mind that it was you I was being set up with, he stated to her. The girl with the peppermint hair nodded and sighed. I know, and that honestly makes me feel a bit better about all this. I suppose that implies that we are now formally engaged, isn't that right? With a nervous scratch on the back of his neck, the Sin of Sloth laughed. The girl nodded and put her hand on his, saying, yeah, I guess it does. Izuku's chamber after a day. The Sin of Sloth picked up an envelope that had been left in his room and exclaimed, what the? When he opened it, he discovered two items. A key to the apartment and condo in the area of Mustutafu between his and Shoko's homes, as well as a lease form. Since he had left the door open, Inko poked her head into his room and asked, what is it, sweetie? With a furrowed brow, the lazy boy answered, an envelope containing a lease form and a key for an apartment between mine and Shoko's house was left here for me. Looking at the form, Inko sighed and hummed, oh that's right, the Todorokis gave you two a place to stay at, didn't they? She hugged him and sighed, saying, I'm going to miss having you at home if you're moving in with Shoko. Izuku's eyes narrowed as he trailed off, speaking of which. He pondered, where's Izumi? The green-haired woman narrowed her eyes and nodded in agreement, saying, good question. Somewhere else, Izumi exclaimed, geez, as she stumbled and crashed to the sand while attempting to drag a refrigerator along a beach, landing flat on her face. From atop the refrigerator Izumi was pulling, the number one hero himself called in jest, hey now, this fridge is pretty cozy up here. Izumi moaned as she stood up, URG, which is making it harder for me to move the damn thing. She asked, would you mind telling me why I'm here moving trash? Easy. I did some research and found out that this place was once a beautiful beach, but garbage from the current washed in and this is the result. The guy clarified. Izumi blinked in memory and said, oh yeah, Izuku mentioned something about that. With all the garbage coming in from the sea, it was easy for civilians to illegally dump trash here and not get caught, she thought. That's why it'll be your job to clean it as your training. It'll help fortify your body to accept one for all. The hero with the highest ranking nodded. Izumi nodded and said, speaking of which, I asked my brother if he would heal a friend of mine and he said he's willing to do that for me, she informed him. When he finally understood what she had said, the man nodded as if he didn't understand. Well, that's good to hear. When? He inquired. The girl answered, after training is done for the day. All Might nodded and said, that's considerate. Somewhere else. When he returned with Izuku, he was now exploring his new condo after deciding to leave everything but his clothes at his previous apartment. Shoko, who had texted him about it on his way there, had apparently stalked it ahead of time for him and her. The silence suggested that either the girl had not yet arrived or that she had already arrived and was napping in bed. In all honesty, he didn't care, because, in a technical sense, they were engaged. In relation to that, Fuyumi, Shoko's older sister, gave him 2 silver rings with a single diamond in the bands when he took the envelope out once more and shook it in his hand. Sighing, he said, this feels so bizarre. He was still in shock at the whole thing. Disbelief was always felt in a situation like this, whether it was taken in stride or not. To be honest, though, who was he to complain? He had been crushing on the girl since they were both 6 years old, and now he was actually living with her and engaged to her. It would be foolish of him to scrutinize that gift. Izuku placed his belongings on the coffee table and then made the decision to look around. He began by noticing that the kitchen was well stocked. He noticed that although the living room had a TV and was suitably furnished, there was no gaming system. He would take care of that. As he looked around the remainder of the apartment, he noticed that it had a desk and a bed but otherwise had a very Spartan appearance. If Shoko wasn't already in the other bedroom, it was most likely the same. It was also noteworthy that the entire apartment condo was built in a traditional Japanese style, complete with all the furnishings that a person accustomed to such a living space would recognize. In fact, they had 2 kimonos at home, one of which was noticeably missing. Yes, Shoko is present. The Grizzly Sin thought, the missing kimono confirms it. Then he heard a door open and saw Shoko wearing her kimono as she left the bathroom, most likely after taking a shower. Izuku's face instantly turned beet red when he saw the girl of his dreams in the same room as him, drying her hair and practically nude. Her light blue silk kimono draped over her slightly damp body, highlighting her figure and curves, not to mention the ample amount of cleavage visible. The boy silently stared at her, and Shoko must have sensed his gaze because she turned to face him and gave a start. She gasped, oh, Izuku, I didn't hear you come in, and the boy snapped out of his daze. Yeah. I just got here. He coughed uncomfortably while speaking. Well I just wanted to see how you were settling in. He sighed. The two-toned girl nodded and then noticed the rings. I'm fine. The fact that this apartment is Japanese-styled makes it feel more like home. She inquired, are those our engagement rings? Yeah. The boy nodded, his face still flushed. Your sister got them for us, and left them with me, he continued. Shoko nodded as she approached her fiancé and took his hand, saying, that does sound like her. I don't think I said this, but I was really happy to see you again, he replied. Izuku merely placed her ring on her finger while gently squeezing her hand. As she placed his ring on him, he grinned and said, me too. After standing apart for a while, Shoko finally gave the boy a tight hug, pressing her body against his so he could feel how soft she was. She exhaled, feeling at ease as her fiancé gave her a small smile in return for the embrace. I missed you, she said. He replied softly, I missed you, too. Later. As Izumi led him to Dagoba Beach, Izuku asked, okay, sis, where's this friend of yours? When they got there, his sister said, he's at the beach waiting for us. She clarified, pointing to the location of All Might, who was standing tall in his buff form, saying, in fact, he's right over there. With a bewildered blink, the Grizzly Sin asked, All Might? In need of healing? He pondered, am I missing something? Izumi said to him, wait for it, just before All Might unexpectedly lost and started coughing up blood. What the actual fuck? Izuku exclaimed, startled. The man informed him, yeah, your sister didn't expect it either. He pulled up his shirt and showed the Grizzly Sin his wound, saying, the reason I'm like this is due to this injury. Izuku let out a horrified, gak, before gathering his thoughts. Okay, yeah, I'm definitely healing you. You need it the most right now, he said. He touched the wound with his hand, letting his quirk know what it was doing. His fingers snapped, clearing the wound, and All Might doubled over as he felt his body regenerate. Status demotion, he intoned. He felt his stomach grow back where it had once been empty. The harm to his respiratory system was no different. I can't believe it. I'm healed. The man let out a startled blink. Izuku shrugged and laughed a little, saying, yeah, I enjoy healing like that. He turned to his sister and said, also, Izumi, mind explaining why you're with All Might, all of a sudden? The wind-using mind reader shrugged and said, oh, he's training me for UA. With narrowed eyes, the Grizzly Sin hummed, is that so? Before transforming Chastifole into the swarm of spears he enjoyed using to fend off unscrupulous individuals. If she gets hurt, I'm coming after you and cutting you so badly it'll make swordsmen take notes, he threatened the man. The man gulped and nodded, noted. His sister added, oh, hey, Izuku. How are you settling in with Shoko? You two planning on sleeping in the same bed tonight? She teased. The boy yelled, wah. As the atmosphere shifted and his swarm of spears transformed back into a pillow, he stammered, www, we just moved in together. We're not skipping all the way to the next level, initially. Izumi rolled her eyes and said, there's a difference between sleeping in the same bed and banging in the same bed, genius. She blushed in embarrassment as her brother retaliated with a joke, you would know, wouldn't you? She laughed and said, shut up, don't bring my relationship with Kachan into this. All Might found their sibling banter to be quite wholesome, and he couldn't help but laugh. Timeskip. After about a month, Izuku had eventually made himself at home with Shoko, and the two had actually gotten used to sharing a bed. Especially since Shoko had been growing closer to Izuku over the course of the days, seemingly expressing a similar level of romantic interest in him as they became more intimate. However, Izuku was wearing gray pajama shorts and a shirt, and the two-toned girl was currently lying her head on his lap while the TV played. The girl was only wearing a white button-up shirt and white underwear. The two were viewing an American film from the pre-Quirk era, specifically the original Despicable Me film. At the moment, they had no real desire for romance. They also need a little humor at the moment. But that didn't mean Shoko wasn't considering it. Izuku seemed to be unaware of this because he was primarily focused on the movie and the popcorn they had prepared. That is, until he felt Shoko crawl up into his lap and place her head on his chest, just before she began kissing his neck. As previously stated, she grows more loving over time. Without really objecting to what was taking place, the boy remarked, somebody's getting bold. Shoko didn't really say anything, she just waited until she was settled in his lap, then she bit into a Kit Kat bar and gave him a direct look as though she were offering it to him. Izuku bit down on it and removed a tiny piece, chuckling a little. But Shoko chose to lurch forward and put the remainder in his mouth, with a kiss, before he could back off. Izuku simply sighed, kissed her back, and gave her a tight hug without even being angry. As they parted ways, the girl whispered in his ear, "I love you." As they continued to watch their film, the grisly Sin squeezed her and whispered back, "I love you, too." Time skip. After 3 months. After one of her workouts, Izumi sighed as she walked off Dagoba Beach, intending to take a shower and try to get some rest. What was the issue? She wasn't close to a bus stop, and her house was a bus ride away. But the Bakugo household was only a block or two away. She moaned wearily, "Maybe I can swing by Kachan's place for a shower." The girl jumped when a voice behind her said, "How about I do you one better and wash you down myself?" Izumi turned to see her boyfriend, who appeared to be returning from a workout, and gasped, "Who, Kachan?" The Pomeranian received a nod in response to his comment, "I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you just finished a workout." He nodded and said, "All right, same here." "So, what do you say about us taking a bath together?" he offered. The girl sighed in response, already anticipating it, "I could totally use one right now." With a smile on his face, Katsuki lifted her into his arms and began carrying her to his home. "And how about after that, I give you a full body massage?" he continued. The girl responded with a joyful smile, "With those divine hands of yours? You spoil me." The Pomeranian kissed Izumi and carried her into the restroom, saying, "You're my woman, Izumi. Spoiling you is fun for me." Somewhere else. Back with Izuku and Shoko, a similar scenario was unfolding with the young couple. The only distinction was that Izuku was cleaning his fiancée after she returned from a training day, and they were already in the bathtub. As he cleaned her, the boy questioned, "What kind of training is Enji putting you through? You're all tense." The girl whispered, "I'd rather not talk about it." She sighed, "At least not now." As she faced him in the tub, Izuku nodded and chose not to pry, letting him see her nude body and how much it had changed over the years. Sitting on his lap and pressing her chest against his, she hugged his neck and said, "Be honest, Izuku." She muttered, "Even with my scar, do you still find me attractive?" It was not the most irrational fear. She could easily be mistaken for a man because of her more athletic build, short hair, and chilly manner. She was clearly not a boy because of her figure. It would be reasonable to assume that some people wouldn't find her particularly attractive given the scar. Izuku kissed the scarred left side of her face in answer to her query. In his most sincere voice, he told her, "I do, and nothing will change that." Tears streamed down the two-toned girl's face as she kissed him, pressing her body against his and receiving a nearly instantaneous response. Izuku quickly brought himself back under control as he hugged her back, before the two finished bathing and got out of the tub. But instead of putting their kimonos on right away, Izuku took some time to start massaging Shoko on their bed. The two-toned girl couldn't help but moan, her body shuddering in response to his touch as he worked to undo the tenseness of her muscles. "Feeling better?" the boy asked his fiancée. Yes, thanks." Shoko sighed as she sat up, putting on her robe while he did the same. "Shall I get us something cold to drink for a movie in bed, dear?" she asked, going over to a small fridge in the bedroom and pulling out 2 glass bottles of ice-cold milk. This was specifically Hokkaido dairy milk, the best milk in Japan and a very common thing to drink after a long soak, especially among those who go to the region's many bathhouses and hot springs. "I'll pick out the movie, beloved." Izuku nodded with a smile as he went to get the TV in their shared room set up. The girl couldn't help but blush at the pet name he used as she joined him in bed, her heart fluttering as he held her close to him, not letting her go. And seeing as they were very much in a romantic mood at the present moment, the boy decided to cater his choices to that particular criteria. Time skip. It was now 7 months into the 10-month time frame and Izumi was nearing the end of her training period. However, what All Might's workout regimen didn't take into account was the fact that the girl and her boyfriend were a very physically affectionate couple, as physical contact was Katsuki's preferred love language, while Izumi's was conveying her feelings telepathically. Things got a bit awkward because of that. The consequences of this oversight became apparent when she soon collapsed during a routine jog. This was due to Katsuki becoming annoyed with how her schedule had made them decrease their time together, and how the few times he did see her, she was constantly getting hit on by other guys. Therefore, the Pomeranian invited her to stay for the weekend, where he fucked her into the bedsheets for 3 days in a row, out of jealousy and a possessive need to prove that Izumi Midoriya was his and no one else's. Izumi could hardly do anything as a result, assuming Katsuki was kind enough to allow her to retain the sensation in her legs. As she jogged behind All Might, holding a safe, she unintentionally collapsed on her face. The man asked, "Whoa, hey, what's wrong?" The girl moaned, tired. Can't feel my legs. Let me guess. Your boyfriend again? Toshinori sighed, anticipating the response. The girl moaned and strained to sit up, saying, he's been getting very possessive as of late, yes. And when he gets possessive, he tends to want to show his affection his preferred way, only far more intense than usual, she murmured. Her mentor asked, have you tried talking to him about it? Try to get him to tone it down? Izumi couldn't contain her laughter as she said, hey, you clearly don't know him at all if you're asking that. But I wouldn't want him to. I like it when he lets his body do the talking. She sighed. Besides, it technically counts toward endurance training, she thought. The man coughed awkwardly and shrugged, saying, awkward, but okay. Izumi grinned and said, it'll be fine, somewhere else. In the meantime, Izuku and Shoko were seen tending to Izuku's Yggdrasil in the patio garden of their condo. As she pruned a branch, the two-toned girl remarked, you know, I don't think I've ever really taken the time to really appreciate the beauty nature produces. Especially when it's mixed into something like this, she continued. The sin of sloth nodded as he completed the remaining trimming of his tree, but then he caught a glimpse of something. It's definitely something you should look back on, you're right. It was a bunch of elementary school children torturing a puppy. Oh no. He shouted in his head, letting his sloth take precedence for the time being. Shoko, pause on plant care. I need to teach some kids why it's bad to torment animals, he barked. Shoko's face turned stony and cold as she was about to ask him what he was talking about when she realized what the children were doing. She firmly told him, go. He leapt onto his pillow and flew down to where the children were. He kicked two of them away from the defenseless puppy right away, putting himself in the way of Chastiful's transformation so he could pick it up and protect it from its abusers. One of the children foolishly demanded, hey, give us our punching bag back, but Izuku turned around and gave them a cold glare. He asked, and why should I cater to a few kids who think tormenting animals is fun, before turning to face the shivering, whimpering puppy, which was obviously bruised and battered but fortunately not seriously hurt. He nodded as he floated away, putting the puppy on a soft pillow as soon as he arrived at his and Shoko's apartment so he could tend to its wounds. Let's get you home. He got a good look at the lil pupper and noticed that it was a beagle, with a fur pattern that almost made it look like Snoopy. In an attempt to soothe the puppy, he whispered, hey, it's okay. You're safe now. Shoko brought the beagle some rice cereal soaked in milk, which it eagerly began to eat while Izuku bandaged it. The beagle appeared hesitant at first, but soon began to crawl towards him. The girl scoffed at the idea, asking, where do kids get off to torturing a defenseless puppy? The grizzly Sin patted the dog's head and sighed, I honestly don't know. He nodded and said, I think we should keep this one. Shoko nodded and gave the little animal a small smile while he consumed his meal. I agree, he looks so adorable. Izuku nodded as the small beagle kept devouring his food, his tiny tail wagging wildly. Let's call you Snoopy, since that's who he looks like. The girl with two tones nodded and said, I like it. Guess this means we'll need to shop for some dog-related stuff, she thought. Wanna make it a shopping date? Her fiancé proposed. We'll need to take him to a vet to make sure he doesn't have any internal injuries or diseases anyway, he said. Shoko nodded in response, sure, time skip. It was finally the end of the 10-month period, but Izumi finished early, a full week before the exam was supposed to start, because she had worked extra hours. When All Might arrived at Dagoba Beach that Friday morning, he was immediately taken aback by this. Izumi was sitting atop a massive heap of trash in front of him, staring at the rising sun despite the cold air. She was also quite sweaty. The girl exclaimed, woohoo, as she completed her assignment before fainting. Toshinori noticed that the entire beach was spotless as she gazed out at it. Not a single bottle cap remained. Holy crap, the symbol of peace exclaimed, looking around horrified. There's nothing left, the whole beach is completely clean, he yelled. He was so amazed that, after a moment, he unconsciously became buff. This is amazing, he exclaimed. Izumi, completely worn out from what had just happened, merely laughed as she slid down from the pile of trash. As her mentor came up to her, she gave a feeble smile and said, I did it, All Might. You did, and with a week to spare. You blew my expectations away completely. The man nodded, pleased to have found someone who was so diligent. Izumi nodded and said, thanks. Guess this'll let me get used to one for all better. She looked down at herself and saw that her figure had become more toned, her ass had gotten bigger, and her breasts had grown an entire cup size to an H cup, rivaling those of heroes like Mirko or even Midnight. She was undoubtedly a young model now, if she wasn't already. The top hero pondered in agreement. That is true. After that, he removed a lock of hair from his head. He told them to eat this. The girl said, stunned, what? To inherit one for all you need to swallow some of my DNA, it's how it works, the man replied. Izumi moaned, you gotta be kidding me. Later, as he assisted her in getting home from the beach, Katsuki asked, wait, you actually want to deep throat me? He said, like right now? The girl nodded and moaned, yeah. I need a distraction from my aching muscles right now. She sighed and continued, and a way to get this taste out of my mouth. He informed her, we'll need to find somewhere private. She said, how about in your room? As the two headed to the bomber's house, the boy nodded and said, sure. My house is closer, anyway. You're gonna mind break me, aren't you? The girl asked with a knowing expression. The blonde nodded as he picked her up and carried her away, saying, only if you want to. Somewhere else. In the meantime, after 10 months of cohabitation, Izuku and Shoko had settled in with their new puppy and had grown incredibly affectionate and open to one another. But when Izuku returned to the condo with groceries this past week, he was in for a big surprise. Shoko was in the kitchen, wearing only an apron and her hair tied in a ponytail since it had grown out. The boy's eyes grew wide as he observed his fiancée, dressed as she was, attempting to prepare a meal for them using recipes her sister had put together for her. Hearing the door open and close, Shoko turned to face her fiancé, who was staring at her with a smile on her face. Welcome home, she exclaimed, running toward him with a smile. With her chest bouncing in her apron, she told him, I just finished making dinner. The two-toned girl hugged his neck and said, so, would you like to have it first? Or perhaps a bath before dinner? Or maybe, she purred, would you like to have me first? After putting the groceries on the counter and taking a moment to gather his thoughts, Izuku turned to Shoko and remained silent. Snoopy didn't even bother to follow them as he silently threw her over his shoulder, causing her to yell in surprise. He then carried her all the way to their bedroom and shut the door. Everyone is aware of what transpired after that. Somewhere else, Izumi groaned as she collapsed back onto Katsuki's bed, separating from him with a loud pop, her face covered in the smell and proof of sex. So good, exclaimed the girl, panting as Katsuki undressed them both. As he took something from his nightstand and held her naked in his arms, the blonde told her, nah, don't call me that. He held up an engagement ring and said, how about future husband instead? At that, Azumi's eyes widened with surprise and delight. After having sex, is her boyfriend asking her to marry him? The most amazing day ever? To Katsuki's amusement, she exclaimed, yes, yes. 1,000,000 times yes, as she excitedly took the ring from him and placed it on her finger. The boy grinned and embraced Izumi, saying, I love you, Izumi. He whispered, I can't wait to make you the mother of my children. A whisper was returned by the wind using telepath, I can't wait to grow fat with your children. The two then began to make love to each other once more, their bodies entwining as they gave each other a passionate, open kiss. They probably wouldn't stop for some time. The apartment where Izuku and Shoko reside. After a rather lengthy half-day and night of making love to his fiancée, Shoko Todoroki, Izuku yawned as he awoke. Speaking of which, his fiancée was lying under the covers next to him, looking ecstatic. It would almost seem as though she had no prior issues at all. The girl stirred as she woke up, her heterochromic eyes discovering that her beloved fiancé was what greeted her. Izuku grinned as he brushed a stray red and white hair out of her face. She sighed joyfully as she sat up, and Izuku gave her a quick good morning kiss. Good morning, my love. When they parted ways, Izuku sighed equally joyfully, good morning, my dear. If memory serves me, today is the day of the entrance exams. He was humming. Before turning to face the clock, Shoko nodded and said, yes, I have a special admissions exam. As the sheets dropped off her body, exposing her nude body to her partner, she wrote, but from the looks of things we have 2.5 hours before they start. The grizzly Sin got up and grinned, saying, then why don't we enjoy that time together, He gave Shoko some eye candy, which she freely consumed. As she tried to entice him back into bed with her, she quickly embraced him and began kissing him repeatedly. She pulled him onto her and said, you're coming back to bed, mister. I want another round. Holding the girl close, the grizzly Sin said, I don't remember you being this demanding 10 months ago. Shoko laughed and said, being in a functional relationship can change a girl. As their bodies merged, the boy purred and kissed her, saying, come here then, you. Somewhere else, Izumi was lying face down on Katsuki's bed with her ass in the air, The bed linens clenched in her hands and teeth, and her eyes were filled with hearts as she let out muffled groans of bliss. However, after they had finished a morning play, Katsuki was lying beside her. The blonde laughed and asked, "Have I mentioned how cute you look after you come?" As Izumi fell face down on the bed beside him, trembling and groaning joyfully, the proof of their romp quickly spilling out of her. "So, good," she groaned drunkenly. "Oh, that's just adorable." Katsuki grinned as he embraced his girlfriend, who had turned fiancé, and planted a kiss on her, which appeared to gradually rouse her. As she nestled into her lover, the vedette sighed, "You always know how to make me lose my senses." With her engagement ring still on, the blonde grinned and said, "You look cute when you're like that." After kissing her from her cheek to her neck and giving her a hickey, he asked, "So, when did you say you wanted to make this official?" "Ideally, before the entrance exams." Izumi answered. She laughed and said, "I'll keep Izuku from trying to kill you, then." Without replying, Katsuki continued to suck on her neck before abruptly moving onto her chest. Things became sultry once more, and the girl groaned. Later, Izuku literally blurted, "You guys are what?" as he, Izumi, and Katsuki strolled to Ua together. Izumi nodded and laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, it literally happened last night." Idly, she added, "After we had sex." Izuku tightened his grip on Chastieful's pillow form and growled, "Are you trying to sign your own death certificate?" Verdette told her brother, "Calm down, buddy. You know he won't mess anything up." Holding his fiancé close, Katsuki told the boy, "Izumi's my woman and mine alone. Ruining that is the last thing on my mind. I'll make her the happiest woman in the country. That's a promise," he continued. Shoko told her fiancé, "You know, given how Katsuki is, I think you can let the matter lie." Izuku grunted, still looking a little irritated. "Okay." Before anyone could fully react, Izumi stumbled on herself as they arrived at the front door of the main school building, where the four were still traveling. Then, without her quirk, she began to float. Izumi blinked in astonishment and perplexity. What? They turned to see a brunette girl standing there, apparently going in the same direction as them, after hearing a girl behind them say, "Sorry about that." She grinned and said, "I stopped you with my quirk." Izumi nodded and straightened herself up, saying, "Oh, thanks." She said, "Who are you?" "I'm Ochako Uraraka." The girl grinned. She laughed uneasily. "Man, isn't this way nerve-wracking?" Izuku told her in a casual manner, "Just keep a level head and it won't feel that way." Katsuki laughed and said, "Only you would say that." The grizzly Sin shrugged and said, "Because it's true." Later, while Shoko was sent somewhere else for the special recommendations exam, Izuku, Katsuki, and Izumi sat in the auditorium. The three of them quickly discovered that Present Mike, the voice hero, was in charge of the test. The man shouted, "All right, welcome to the UA entrance exams." Izuku winced slightly at the volume. He added, "Can I get a HEEEY?" At the same volume. He received nothing but silence. "I forget how loud he tends to be," Izuku moaned, donning earmuffs to block out the majority of the noise. Wearing her own earmuffs, Izumi simply gave her brother a sympathetic pat on the back, sharing his suffering. The sound hero's loud voice did not appeal to either sibling. Okay. So, in this practical exam you'll be doing battles against fake villains in urban settings. Each villain type has a different point value, so if you want the most points then better choose wisely." The voice character clarified. One of the applicants, a blue-haired, bespectacled teenager, stood up and said, "Excuse me." As a spotlight shone on him. "The form says that there are 4 villain types, but you've only listed 3. If this is an oversight on UA's side of things, then I am greatly disappointed," he said. The twins shrugged when Katsuki whispered, "Who's this hard ass?" The voice hero hummed, "Oh, that's a 0-pointer. Think of it as an obstacle in the exam for you to get around. You can fight it, but there's just no point," he clarified. Izuku nodded and said, "Oh, so that's what it is." Somewhere else. In the meantime, Shoko was preparing for the recommendation test. With the other people present, she wasn't alone. As he faced a sagging Shoko, a rather rowdy teenager asked, "Hey, you're Endeavor's daughter, right?" He grinned and extended a hand to shake hers, saying, "I'm Inasa Yoarashi, it's nice to meet you." The two-toned girl shook his hand and hummed, "You seem interesting." Before he could respond, she introduced herself, saying, "I'm Shoko." Inasa saw the girl's engagement ring on her right hand as soon as they shook hands. He blinked in shock and said, "Wait, you're engaged to someone?" Yes, my childhood friend and I entered an arranged marriage 10 months ago. Shoko gave a nod. She smiled slightly and said, needless to say, I'm happy with the outcome. Most people usually weren't thrilled with arranged marriage, from what I've read, but I guess you're good where you are. Inasa laughed. As she and the other students positioned themselves, the two-toned girl grinned and said, you have no idea. It was basically a race to the finish line for Shoko and the other suggested students, with the proviso that they could, if they could, use their peculiarities to speed up the process. As the umpire, Mike called out, on your marks. Get ready, while the other students were occupied with the written test. Go, he exclaimed. Shoko took off right away, leaving a trail of ice behind her. Inasa trailed closely behind. Is she creating a path of ice to proceed? Nice, he thought, then grinned. But I'm capable of more. As he launched a powerful wind blast to get past the two-toned girl, he continued. As Shoko observed her opponent, she thought, interesting, wind powers. But his travel form is sloppy, not nearly as fluid and finessed as Izuku's. Thinking that the boy's use of his power was not as good as her fiancé's, she mentally corrected herself. Even though Shoko didn't care, it did earn him first place in the end. All that mattered was that she passed. Hey, that was a great job you did out there, Inasa said, jumping up to give Shoko a shoulder hug, but she ducked. The girl weaved away and told him, don't. He said, perplexed, what? I'm just trying to be friendly. I can see that, but I already have a fiancé, so I'd rather he be the only one to show me such affection. He replied. The wind-using teenager nodded and conceded, okay, that's fair. Somewhere else. Meanwhile, Izuku was currently lounging on his spear's floating pillow form while everyone waited for the practical exam to start, which was actually taking a bit. Oh man, this is boring, the grizzly Sin yawned. The boy was wearing a similar outfit to what he had on as a kid, blue pants, a blue shirt with a similarly colored hoodie that had orange on it. It also allowed most to see the grizzly tattoo on his leg. Tell me about it. A new voice chimed in agreement, causing Izuku to turn and see a boy his age with messy purple hair and a tired look on his face. He actually looked kinda pale. His attire was just a purple tracksuit with black shoes. So, a fellow long nap enjoyer, I take it. The boy noted, rolling over onto his stomach to face his new acquaintance. Name's Izuku, the grizzly Sin of sloth, he added as he introduced himself. Hitoshi Shinso, and yeah, I do enjoy a good nap. The purple-haired teen nodded in reply as he introduced himself. Sloth, huh, seems like you enjoy pretty much just naps, then. He added in a jabbing tone. Ha ha, very funny. The boy deadpanned. I'll have you know it's because my quirk is similar to the original 8th Fairy King's Harlequin's power, because my family traces itself back to him. He added. I find that hard to believe, Shinso said skeptically. Izuku simply just gave him a deadpan look as he snapped his fingers, causing his pillow to become chastiful, which pointed itself directly at Shinso's face while Izuku was laying on the spear's shaft. You were saying, he asked rhetorically. Point made, Shinso conceded with wide eyes. It was then that the exam started. As he surfed on his spear and the boy ran beside him, Izuku asked, Hey Shinso, you have a combat quirk? The boy appeared to be preparing for insults when he said, no. Just one that lets me hypnotize people when they respond to certain things I say. To Shinso's surprise, the grizzly Sin said, huh, that could come in handy for getting panicking civilians under control. Actually now that I think about it, I remember seeing a crowbar over by that dumpster. He said. As Shinso grabbed the crowbar and 2 one-pointers came around the corner, he added, it's not a quirk but it's better than nothing. The hypnotist said, I think I'll stick with you. It feels healthier for me that way. As the bots charged, Izuku nodded, good move. The robot bent and snapped back with enough force to cut it in half through the waist as the teenager leapt over it with his spear. Shinso, meanwhile, jammed the robot's wheel with his weapon, causing it to topple over, and then he stabbed the robot in the head with the prying end. Somewhere else, she was using her wind manipulation skills to send sharp winds to destroy any robots that got in her way while she was with Izumi. She hoped the brunette was doing well because she had no idea who else was nearby besides Ochako. She gained more points by blowing multiple robots into a building with a gale force wind, which caused the building to collapse on top of them. She thought out loud, this feels almost too easy since I can cut loose. She laughed and said, knowing Katsuki, he's having a ball with this. She soon came upon what appeared to be a perfect replica of a wedding boutique while searching for more robots. The girl was distracted by the fact that her reflection perfectly lined up with one of the dresses, giving the impression that she was wearing it. Damn, I look good. She smiled as she looked at her reflection and imagined Katsuki standing next to her in the tuxedo on display. However, her fantasy was interrupted when a three-pointer threw a chunk of concrete at the display, destroying it. Robots are going to die today, she shouted in frustration. After destroying the three-pointer, she went to check the damage and discovered that the clothing was remarkably undamaged. Just as the ground started to rumble, she wondered, I wonder if the school will let me have these. Startled, she glanced around before a massive shadow passed over her. She turned to look up and saw the zero-pointer looming over her. Izumi asked incredulously, what kind of budget does this school have? As she got ready to back off, she clarified, actually if they can afford tailored clothes to display in stores, I really shouldn't be surprised. Help, a person exclaimed in agony. Ochako was pinned beneath some debris when the vedette whipped her head around, and the zero-pointer wasn't slowing down. She swore, "Aw shit, not good. No time to think, gotta act now," she cried, flying up to the robot's face and beginning to push herself. All right, one for all, help me here, she pleaded as the energy surged through her. Gale Force Wall, she exclaimed as a huge F5 tornado broke out between the robot and the other students, sending them hurtling backward and even tearing apart several buildings. Before the tornado completely engulfed it and ripped it out of sight, it even began to drag in the struggling zero-pointer, ripping plates off its chassis. Ochako was even set free as a result of it. The enormous robot was propelled into the air and sent hurtling back, landing in a lifeless heap on the ground. Izumi smiled at her recent accomplishment, but the joy was fleeting as she began to sway. She moaned, "Ooh, too much power," before passing out. Somewhere else, back with Izuku, Shinso was using his newly acquired crowbar to either hook, stab, impale, or smash the heads of any robots he could get, while Chastiful was using his increased form to skewer several robots at once. He had his spear change into its bare form, grapple a three-pointer, grapple another, and throw it to the ground, where Shinso could smash it. The ground began to shake just as the boy was about to thank Izuku for the help. Before the zone's zero-pointer rose up and peered down at everything, Shinso moaned, "Oh great, now what?" He swallowed uneasily and said, I think it's time for us to go, don't you?" When Izuku noticed that some of the applicants were struggling to escape the beast and were about to be trampled, he remained silent. However, that's when he noticed that the robot had some rust on it. He floated up to the bot's face, transformed Chastiful back into its spear form, and gave it a serious look. He snapped his fingers and intoned, "Status, promotion." Snap, and as he floated to the ground, the robot began to oxidize quickly and rust more quickly in a matter of seconds. But before it could completely rust away, the giant robot's head fell from the main body of the Grizzly Sin as it was returning to ground level, and it was falling toward Izuku. Shinso's eyes widened in alarm as he saw this. He screamed, "Move," and tackled Izuku out of the way before the head could hit the floor. The Sin of Sloth moaned and slowly stood up again, saying, "URG. Thanks." Shinso rolled onto his back, exhausted, and moaned, "Don't mention it." Right now, the two of them were in dire need of a nap. Time skip. A week later, as they awaited the results, the Midoriya twins were having dinner with Inko. Since they hadn't done much as a family in the previous 10 months due to spending so much time with their respective significant others, they made the decision to have dinner together. Inko asked her children, "Do you two think you did well enough to get in?" Izuku casually responded, "I am well aware of how many robots I trashed. I'm pretty confident in my score." As they continued to eat, Izumi nodded, "Same." Inko didn't say anything for about a minute, which gave her kids a false sense of security that they wouldn't be teased. However, parents were not usually that polite. Both of them almost choked when their mother smirked and said, "Are you two going to tell me when you and your fiancés are planning your weddings?" The Grizzly Sin coughed, "Damn it, Mom. Don't do that." Izumi coughed, "At least wait until we swallow our food." For the last part. Their mother asked, "Well, what's the answer?" Izuku took a moment to drink some water before responding, "Ideally after our first year is up." Izumi went on, "Or sooner if we can't wait any longer. I think I know a good place for you all to have a double wedding." Inko laughed. She added wistfully, "It's actually where Hisashi and I got married." Izumi asked, Where would that be? A shrine in front of Mt. Fuji in Honshu. It's a shrine to Amaterasu that is a sacred wedding spot. The lady replied. Izuku told his sister, I'll share the details with Shoko. Izumi, you do the same with Katsuki. The girl nodded and said, you got it. She grinned and said, thanks mom. Izuku grinned and said, yeah, thanks. Inko grinned and said, happy to help. Later, Shoko was currently having dinner with her siblings Fuyumi and Natsuo at the Todoroki home, while her father was at his office for yet another late-night work shift. In an effort to break the awkward silence that pervaded the room, Fuyumi said, so, Shoko, how's your apartment been treating you so far? The two-toned girl smiled slightly and said, very good, and it helps that Izuku has been much better as my fiancé than I could have hoped for. Seeing the signs, Fuyumi nodded and said, I can tell. He's really been a great influence on you. Natsuo said quite bluntly, I still can't believe you actually went along with it. Once more, he asked directly and bluntly, I mean, after how it ended up with us. Are you sure this is a good idea? In response, Shoko deadpanned him, asking, are you seriously thinking that Izuku will turn out like our so-called father? Well, no, I mean, from what I can remember about the kid when he used to hang out with us, he seemed alright. A bit aloof and lazy, but a nice guy, replied her brother. But, you have to admit, people can change if enough happens to them, and, he did witness what happened to Tuya firsthand, if what he said wasn't just trauma coping. He went on, so he could have turned out any number of negative ways since we last saw him, you'll never know. He continued. Shoko sighed and said, well he seems okay, so I think he got some counseling at some point after that incident. This incident occurred when Tuya lost it and, in a fit of rage, attempted to kill Shoko but was restrained. Then, weeks later, when Enji didn't show up when he asked, his quirk overcame him and he burned himself on a hill, leaving only a jawbone. Since Izuku was visiting at the time, the experience had traumatized him. It appeared that Inko had taken care of that, based on what Shoko had observed. As they continued their soba dinner, Fuyumi said, well, how is Izuku anyway? Why don't you bring him or his sister by? Maybe after the first day of UA is over for us. We can talk then, replied Shoko. Though that's if I can get Katsuki to let Izumi go long enough for that. He's gotten really possessive of her ever since they got together. She laughed. Katsuki, you mean that loudmouthed, foul-tempered, asshole Pomeranian with the explosive sweaty palms? Natsuo asked. Yep, Izumi got together with him, and I can tell that not only does he have no intent of letting her go, she's okay with that being the case. Shoko confirmed the news. I guess their relationship is deceptively functional, or something like that. She thought. Fuyumi nodded and said, sounds like it. She questioned, they have any favorite foods? Izuku likes katsudon, Izumi is a fan of yakisoba with cabbage and extra pickled red ginger, and Katsuki likes anything spicy. The girl with two complexions responded. She went on, so he might like your mapo tofu. She picked at her food and scowled, saying, I tried to get Izuku to try the cold soba you gave me the recipe for, but he didn't like it. She whispered, is my cooking that bad? Fuyumi frowned and said, I don't think so. She said, maybe he prefers his soba warm. Shoko acknowledged, yeah, I guess so, I mean, he eats everything else I cook. Natsuo laughed and said, hey, looks like you got him hooked. Shoko laughed and said, I think you might be right. One of the other two-toned girls in the room laughed and said, well, at least Izuku didn't turn out badly. She corrected herself, saying, actually one more thing. I know it's a touchy subject, but are you planning on seeing Mom again? I mean, I'm sure she'd like to see you again, and see how you've been doing. She inquired. Not to mention, if you and Izuku do get married, don't you think he should meet his future mother-in-law? She asked. Shoko sighed and said, I'm not ready to see her again yet. Her breath sounded unsteady. Izuku's mentioned seeing you guys again for a while now, especially since we started living together. She clarified. But, I don't think I'm ready, I need to sort some things out first. She acknowledged. Natsuo told her, if you need someone to talk to, let us know. Shoko grinned and nodded, saying, thanks, Natsu. But yeah, I'll see if Izuku can get his sister, Mom and Katsuki to come over for dinner after the first week of school is over. She stated to Fuyumi. The older woman grinned and said, I'll make sure to prepare a complete menu. Somewhere else. In the meantime, Katsuki was dining with his parents in the Bakugo household, and the main topic of conversation was the Pomeranian's engagement to Izumi. Mitsuki said, "You seriously couldn't have waited until your second year at least. Don't give me that yahag, you came on to dad damn near the first day on the job." The child snapped. Masaru laughed and added, "He's got you there, sweetie." Mitsuki had actually done that. The matriarch of Bakugo sighed, "Okay, fine, so ya got engaged to Izumi." She asked, "When's the wedding?" Just as his phone rang, the boy answered, "Either after our first year or before that. Depends on how things go." He muttered, "What the?" as he checked his phone and saw that Izumi, and a number he didn't recognize had texted him in a group chat. Masaru asked, "What is it?" The eruptive teenager responded, "Texts from Izuku and Izumi along with someone else I don't have a number for." Mitsuki asked, "What's it about?" The boy said, "Hold on," as messages began to arrive. Izumi. "Mom just told Izuku and me about her and dad's wedding location, sweetie. It seems like the type we would pursue." "Where is it, Katsuki?" Izumi. "The Amaterasu shrine in front of Mount Fuji in Honshu." Izuku. "Shoko and I will get married there as well. And speaking of which, she wants to say something." Katsuki opened it and saw what it said, assuming that was probably the unknown number. Shoko. "After our first day at UA, I would like you, Izuku, and Izumi to join me for dinner. Fuyumi and Natsuo haven't seen you in a long time." Katsuki. "Who? Every extra I meet isn't really something I keep track of." Shoko. "My sister and brother." Katsuki. "Oh, them. Okay, of course." Izumi. "Add-ons, really. The least you can do, Katsuki, is to stop being so self-centered since they will be our in-laws." Izuku. "Sis, I'm fairly certain that wishing for that is pointless." Shoko. "I have to concur." To his parents' confusion, Katsuki simply laughed. Mitsuki asked, "What's up?" "Pretty sure half and half just invited me to dinner with her family." He responded, "I wouldn't be surprised if the whole family is next." He continued. "When?" asked Mitsuki. The boy answered, "After our first day at UA is over." He was certain that he was getting in, and if his intuition was correct, so were the others. "All right, when can we expect to be invited? Or Inko for that matter?" she inquired. The Pomeranian decided to stop the conversation there and shrugged as he continued to eat. "No idea." Time skip. Later on, Izuku returned to his apartment and discovered Shoko sitting on the couch, Snoopy in her lap, waiting for him. "Did I miss anything while I was out?" he inquired. The two-toned girl answered, "Well, Arua letters showed up." She pointed to the coffee table where his letter was indeed waiting for him and continued, "I found out I got in, but I don't know about you. Yours is sitting right there on the coffee table." Izuku nodded and sat down with his fiancée. He opened his envelope and chose to read the letter itself rather than turn on the hollow disk. "Let's see." As Snoopy licked his owner's cheek, Shoko peered over his shoulder and asked, "What's it say?" Izuku said simply, "I got in." There's no need to get overly excited about it, even though it was a big deal. Then Izumi texted him, "Izumi. I entered, and All Might teaches at UA." Izuku muttered, "Huh," as he and Shoko exchanged glances before the boy made the decision to activate the hollow disk. "Booyah, I am here as a projection now," exclaimed the peace symbol. The two said together, "Oh." Izuku turned it off because he didn't see the point of listening to the entire thing. In any case, he was aware that he got in. After a moment, Izuku said, "Do we still have that champagne bottle?" The girl nodded and said, "And leftover fried chicken, rice, and gyoza." "Then let's celebrate," the Grizzly Sin said with a smile as he led Snoopy and Shoko into the kitchen. A festive dinner was in order. The teachers were reviewing the exam results on the first day of classes, and they seemed to be particularly interested in Izuku and Izumi's final attacks. The male twin literally snapped his fingers and made a zero-pointer fall apart with corrosion. According to the present mic, one woman said, his sister literally tore hers apart with a tornado. That's impressive. But notice how the corrosion started from a spot where the robot was already rusted. Seems more like his power makes things worse or better depending on his desire rather than causing it. Another individual nodded. An astute voice said, so he could use a simple paper cut to potentially cripple or kill someone. He looked at Izuku's file and said, I suppose it's good he knows what to do, given the lack of reports regarding that sort of thing. One voice nodded, seems pretty interesting. Though I am curious, the boy he was with. Why didn't he use his quirk, I wonder? They were thinking. A voice from the west said, perhaps he doesn't have a combat quirk, so he had to improvise. The seductive voice adds, so he's a bit like you, isn't he, Eraser? Although he remained silent, a man off to the side appeared intrigued. Somewhere else, Izuku asked as he prepared his backpack, you got everything? Shoko nodded and picked up her bag, saying, yeah. Before repairing his tie, she sighed and said, wait, Izuku. She sighs and says, you tied your tie crooked again. In frustration, the grizzly Sin moaned, oh damn it, not again. Before kissing him, Shoko smiled and sighed, honestly, you're so hopeless. Izuku muttered, not my fault, ties are so hard to do. Shoko simply grinned before turning to face their little beagle, Snoopy, who was pleading with them to allow him to accompany them by pulling on them and placing his small front paws on their legs. His large eyes were staring up at them with pity. Shoko said to the tiny bundle of happiness, sorry, buddy, but we can't bring you with us. Izuku almost grabbed Snoopy and put him in his backpack since he could only whimper and cry pitifully as she picked him up. Fortunately, though, Shoko managed to reach a compromise. She ensured he was securely tucked away by placing him inside her satchel. Izuku whispered, I really hope we aren't called out for this. Shoko grinned and booped him on the nose, saying, stay put. Somewhere else, Izumi, meanwhile, was on her way to school. She had said goodbye to Inko and met up with Katsuki so they could walk together. But as soon as they arrived at Ua, Katsuki pulled Izumi over behind the school's gates, out of sight, and pressed her up against the wall, making out with her as was customary between the two. As they parted to catch their breath, Katsuki sighed, took you long enough. Izumi looked him in the eye and sighed, it's a long commute. Ready to show our class what we're made of? She inquired. He held her close while muttering, I really want to ravage you here and now. So do I, but there's no such thing as a quickie with you involved. Izumi laughed. The boy went on to curse. Shit, he said, after school, then. After school, Izumi gave a nod. The two then made their way to their classroom. Later, together, Izuku and Shoko strolled, or, in Izuku's case, floated, through the Ua hallways in search of their classroom. But as soon as they walked into the classroom, they saw two things that weren't what they had anticipated. One is that Shinso was present instead of Izumi. Second, Katsuki was having a disagreement with someone. She sighed, oh lovely, Shoko. Izuku agreed, muttering, took the words right out of my mouth. Get your feet off that desk now, yelled a child wearing glasses. Katsuki scoffed back, huh, it's only the first day and you're already disrespecting this academy by scuffing school property, you cretin. The child yelled. You're kidding me, right? Did your old school put a stick up your ass? Or were you born with it? The brunette replied. Izuku remarked dryly, oh great. Kachan's being a mood. Shoko said, I guess Izumi's in the class next to us. And that in turn seems to have pissed Bakugo off. She continued. As the boy with the glasses said, let's start over, I'm Tenya Iida from the Sume Private Academy. The bomber challenged, Sume, huh, that means you think you're better than me. I'm gonna enjoy tearing you a new one. He growled.
You'd threaten me? Your own classmate? Are you sure you're in the right place? Iida asked. Shinso saw Izuku and Shoko at that moment. He called, drawing everyone's attention, hey Izuku. The grizzly Sin casually called back, hey, Shinso. Iida said, it's nice to meet you, I'm Tenya Iida. Shoko informed him, we heard. A new voice said, Izumi. Why are you floating on a pillow? And Izuku turned to see a brunette standing there with a rather round face and perma blush. Izuku explained to her, because I'm her twin brother. I'm Izuku Midoriya, Izumi is my younger twin. He responded. Deflated, the girl sighed, oh, she's not in class 1A. That's a bummer. The grizzly Sin shrugged and said, knowing her, she's bummed that she's not in the same class as her boyfriend. Ochako asked, boyfriend, and Shoko pointed to Katsuki, who was still extremely irritated. The two-toned girl clarified, him. Ochako nodded and said, yeah, he doesn't look happy either, by the looks of it. Then another voice raised their voice. They turned to see a weary-looking man with long black hair in a yellow sleeping bag when a weary voice said, if you're here to make friends, then leave. How come that thing exists? Being a little uneasy, Iida, Ochako, and Shoko pondered. Izuku remarked,
that sleeping bag looks really cozy. He wanted one for himself. Really, it was a typical Izuku response. As he emerged from his sleeping bag, the man said, "Welcome to the UA Hero course." Then he entered the room and said, "It took you 8 seconds to shut up, that's not gonna work. Time is precious, rational students would understand that. Hello, I'm Shota Aizawa, your teacher." He continued. "That is our teacher." With the exception of Izuku, Shinso, and Shoko, the class was stunned. Aizawa took several UA track uniforms from his sleeping bag and said, "All right, put these on and go outside." Everyone, including Katsuki and Shoko, laughed when Izuku asked in confusion, "What the? Where'd you get a sleeping bag of holding?" Later, as they arrived at the track field, everyone cried out, "What? A quirk assessment test?" Ochako objected, saying, "What about orientation? We're gonna miss it. If you're gonna make the big leagues, you can't waste time with pointless ceremonies." Aizawa said. When Izuku realized his teacher was one of those guys, he complained, "Oh goody. Here at UA we're not tethered to tradition, that means I can run my class however I see fit." Aizawa stated, "Now you've been taking standardized tests most of your lives, but you never used your quirks on physical exams before." He said, "The higher-ups want to make us think we're all equal by not letting those who have the most power excel. It's not rational. One day the higher board of education will learn." He continued. "So many people disagree with that," Izuku reflected as he lay on his pillow. "Bakugo, you scored highest on the entrance exam. What was your score on a softball throw?" the man asked. After giving it some thought, Katsuki said, 67 meters, if I recall correctly. Aizawa told him, "Try again, but with your quirk this time." The Pomeranian nodded and proceeded to the circle, catching a softball en route. "All right, to clarify," he said, "just do whatever." Their teacher nodded and said, "Anything goes, just stay in the circle." Katsuki nodded, realizing that now was the ideal moment to vent his frustrations. "All right," he finished winding up and threw his pitch. "Boom." After that, there was a huge explosion that sent the ball flying across the campus. As the ball sailed, he cried out, "Die!" before a mushroom cloud appeared in the distance. Izuku nodded. "Yeah, he's pissed." Aizawa showed them Katsuki's 2-kilometer distance and said, "This is what I'm talking about. These tests are meant to help you find the limits of your quirks, and your potential as a pro." One boy exclaimed, "Holy crap. 2 whole kilometers, are you kidding me?" to his surprise. "This is what I'm talking about, using our quirks as much as we want." Another replied. "That looks like fun, so I want to go," exclaimed one girl. "Fun?" Aizawa asked icily, ruining the atmosphere. Izuku interrupted him as he was about to say, "You're going to go up against." The Grizzly Sin uttered in weary irritation, "Natural disasters, supervillains, and insane terrorists. We have 3 years to train hard enough to fight them off by graduation." He asked, "Can we please move this along?" A redhead asked, "What did you do, wake up this morning and choose violence?" Izuku grunted in response, saying, "I just want to get things rolling and waste no time on speeches." Aizawa said, "At least you have your priorities straight. You'll be undergoing 8 tests to gauge your potential as a hero. The one in last place will be assumed to have none, and be expelled immediately." He continued. Shinso asked, "How's that rational? My quirk is entirely mental-based and is still useful in a heroism context, but by your logic I should be expelled." He continued. Izuku jutted his thumb at some seemingly floating clothing and said, "Yeah, not the best logic, especially since the invisible girl over there is technically in the same case as Shinso. I get to say how my class goes, understand? If you have a problem with that, then you can leave right now." Aizawa said. "As if we'd back down from someone who's just being a total ass." Shoko barked. The Grizzly Sin laughed and brushed the man's words aside, saying, "Keep dreaming." Later, -50-meter dash. The first test was a 50-meter dash, and it goes without saying that the results were mixed. Some performed well, some mediocrely, some poorly, and so on. It was Izuku and Katsuki's turn now, though, and the green-haired boy swiftly transformed his pillow into a spear and then used it as a surfboard to pursue his childish friend and rival. As Shoko positioned herself beside Momo Yaoyorozu for their dash, Ochako whispered to Iida, "Hey, you notice how Izuku, Shoko, and Bakugo have engagement rings on their hands?" The blue-haired teenager nodded and whispered back, "I have noticed that, yes."
Do you think we should ask? He wondered. Maybe. The brunette shrugged. Long distance jump. Izuku wasn't too worried about this test, as he just laid on his pillow and flew the whole way to the end point, then floated down, a night mask on his face as he snored loudly. He literally sleep-floated the entire test. Now I know why they call him the Sin of Sloth. Shinso noted. Yeah, he's been like this his whole life. Katsuki nodded. There's no better way to find out that it's never a war crime the first time, than to get between the grizzly sin and nap time. He added. What's that mean? Ochako questioned. They say that the best people to do jobs are the lazy ones, because they can find the quickest and most effective way to do it. Shoko explained as Izuku's sleeping form floated next to her. Izuku's like that in the way that he'll do everything as quickly as possible so that he can go back to doing nothing. And also avoid doing anything. She added. That doesn't sound very heroic. Iida remarked with a blink. Well, take a look at it this way. Shinso said. Which sounds better? A world where the heroes are so quick and effective that they have too much time on their hands due to there being less crime as a result, or ones who aren't as quick and effective who are overworked because there's more crime? He questioned. That first one sounds preferable, honestly. Ochako admitted. Shoko only smiled as she stroked Izuku's hair while he slept. Grip strength. This test was one that the majority of the class save a few did rather average at, with Shoji in particular getting the highest score overall. Izuku felt that he couldn't be bothered to try and top a score that was just over 500 kgs. Repeated sidesteps. This test ended up being dominated by Shoko, who ended up doing ice skating ollie jumps on an ice U ramp. Ball throw. In this test, Ochako actually ended up getting the highest score of infinity, and while everyone attempted to get at least somewhat close to Katsuki's score, Shoko and Momo actually nearly did that with a score of 890 meters and 950 meters respectively, but nothing close to that. Now it was Izuku's turn. Tossing the ball a couple times, he threw it into the air before turning Chastiful into its spear form and then making it bat the ball clear across the field. The end result was him getting right at a kilometer, much to Katsuki's irritation. Yawn, can we hurry this up? It's past my nap time. The grizzly Sin yawned. Is that all you're thinking about? Aizawa deadpanned. Said the one who showed up to class in a sleeping bag. Izuku retorted. Touché. The man shrugged. Somewhere else. Meanwhile in the Class 1A classroom, Shoko's bag moved slightly as Snoopy's tiny head popped out. Looking around, the pup saw that a cup of water was on the podium, so he waddled out of the bag and hopped up on the podium, before starting to drink from the cup to slake his thirst. Then he quickly went back into Shoko's bag for another nap. That was until his little stomach growled. Sighing, the pup got out again and, seeing that his little paws couldn't open the door, he suddenly closed his eyes and teleported to the other side. Using this opportunity to explore, he started walking around the school, sniffing the ground in search of food. After a bit, he caught a scent and followed it all the way to the teacher's lounge. When he entered, it was All Might who spotted the little pupper and blinked in surprise. Well, how'd you get here? The blonde questioned as he picked the little one up, bringing his presence to the attention of the other teachers. Is that a dog? Snipe questioned, sipping his coffee. Apparently. Midnight nodded. How'd he get here? She wondered. From the looks of things he has a collar. Vlad King mused, rubbing the beagle's head as he checked his tags. It says his name is Snoopy. He told them, getting a happy howl in response. And from the sound of it, he's a beagle. He added. Does his collar say who he belongs to? Ectoplasm questioned. Yes, actually, Midoriya and Todoroki. Those are the names on the tag. The blood hero nodded. He must have followed them to school. Powerloader hummed, right as the little pup's stomach growled again. Oh, and he's hungry. Better feed him, he added. The little guy looks really young, actually. One hero noted. Probably for the best he followed them, more or less. He mused. What do we feed him? Snipe wondered. Hound Dog, the non-curricular advisor, took a look at the young pup and using a small bowl from the cabinet, he placed a small pile of steak and rice with an egg from his lunch and placed it on the ground. This should do. The man nodded. Although scared of Hound Dog's appearance, Snoopy practically lit up when he saw the food. It was so bright that he literally teleported out of All Might's hands and in front of the food, much to everyone's shock. Oh my, Nezu uttered in surprise. He's a quirked animal. Midnight gasped, her eyes wide. That certainly explains how he got here. Powerloader nodded.
He must have followed their scent and teleported accordingly. 13 nodded. After eating, Hound Dog offered Snoopy some water, which he lapped up about 2 bowls worth of, before yawning and hopping onto the couch next to Nezu, and actually sleeping next to him. He seems like a very well-behaved pup. Nezu noted. Seems so, but I can tell that he's spoiled too. Hound Dog noted, sitting next to the two and stroking the tiny creature. Pups rarely get this comfortable on couches and beds unless they're spoiled by their owners. He added. Young Midoriya and Todoroki clearly did a good job. The blonde hero mused. I wonder if they're aware that he had a quirk. He added. Doubt it. They'd have made countermeasures otherwise. Hound Dog replied, right as Snoopy scooted closer to him and snuggled against his leg. I think he likes you. Nezu chuckled. Hey, sweet little fella. The advisor chuckled as well. Somewhere else. Meanwhile, the rest of the class's tests went by without a hitch, with Izuku even completing the long-distance run by floating on his pillow and taking another nap. Now they were waiting for the final results. Okay, I'm not even gonna bother saying who's where, so here's the full list. Their teacher said as he projected a hologram from his phone, showing everyone the leaderboard. And as they read down the list, they soon saw that Shinso was in last place. Oh great, here we go, the purple-haired teen groaned. Then, also, I lied, no one's going home, Aizawa revealed, shocking everyone. This caused everyone to express this, a few being notably surprised in particular, with exception to Momo. I'm surprised you guys didn't figure that out. Sorry, guess I should have said something, she said. Izuku deadpanned for everyone else, asking, what was your first clue? As Aizawa informed them, well that's it, class is done for the day. As he left, he added, take a syllabus from the classroom on your way home and have it read by tomorrow morning. Izuku gripped and said, all of that for some brand of hazing. How annoying. His groan was, what a waste. The intercom then began to buzz. Before it was over, Nezu said, will Izuku Midoriya and Shoko Todoroki report to the principal's office? There's been a development regarding something of yours. There was a sound of a puppy barking. Both of them moaned, oh no. Later, the moment the two stepped into Nezu's office, a tiny, white and black figure jumped and buried itself in Izuku's chest, revealing himself to be Snoopy. Nezu said, your puppy is quite the determined fellow. We're sorry about that, he must have hid in Shoko's bag when she wasn't looking. Izuku murmured. Here myself and the rest of the teachers thought he just followed you here. Your explanation makes more sense. Nezu began to hum, though it was for the best since we learned about his quirk. He continued. Shoko blinked and said, I'm sorry, can you run that by us again? Izuku asked, Snoopy has a quirk. The stoat nodded, yes. A teleportation quirk, specifically. We can also tell based on his behavior that you two have done a very good job raising him. He continued. With a somber tone, Shoko remarked, it did take a few months, given how he was being treated when we found him. The Uadine frowned and asked, do I want to know? Izuku hissed without showing any signs of weariness, a bunch of bratty kids were using him as a punching bag. Those little brats should be lucky I didn't give them 4-stage cancer. He screamed. Well for now, I recommend keeping a better eye on him, to make sure he doesn't cause too much trouble. The teacher advised them. Notably, Nezu did not chastise Izuku for what he said, probably because of the past tense. The two-toned girl nodded and said, noted, but we make no promises, considering how teleportation quirks are. The principal said, understandable. I recommend getting a tracker to keep tabs on his location. Izuku nodded and noted to write that down for later. We'll keep that in mind. Still clutching Snoopy, Shoko said, sorry for the trouble. To the relief of the couple, the albino stoat shrugged and said, well, he didn't cause a ruckus, so no harm done. Somewhere else, Izumi, meanwhile, was feeling a little down after being able to return home at last. This was because she wasn't with any of her friends, her brother, or her fiancé because she was in class 1B rather than 1A. This whole thing blows, she muttered to herself. Positively, it was at least somewhat consoling that she had been able to make some new friends. Katsuki then showed up, pulled her into the trees in front of the entrance, and began making out with her. As they withdrew, he told her, you have no idea how much I missed you. Izumi nodded and gave him another kiss, saying, I missed you too, you have no idea. They can make it work, but the next 3 years will be terrible. Somewhere else, As he and Shoko returned to their apartment, Izuku sighed, well, finding out our dog has a quirk was certainly something I wasn't expecting. Yeah, that was a surprise for me, too. We'll need to address registering Snoopy over the weekend. Shoko grinned. As he put things aside, the Grizzly Sin nodded and said, right. The two-toned girl sighed, that's going to be hard to explain. Well, should we go ahead and get ready for the family dinner? She inquired. Izuku nodded, went to get some extra clothes, and went to the bathroom. Yeah, let's get cleaned up, we need a shower. After a few years, it was time to finally meet the Todorokis.
So this was it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.